It's thundering from there.
It's scary.
There are Russians under each bush here. Yep.
I feel it's such an inner jitters, there is fear. And so on.
I hope it won't shoot us.
Chasovого Yaru film by Arsen Tsymbaliuk. Kyiv, 6 a.m. Channel 24 studio. The first time I've been at work so early. And, basically, I didn't come here to shoot videos from the studio. I often hear questions in the comments, what do you say about the war? Sitting in a warm studio. 90 or 95% of the time this question is asked by Russian bots. But I'm sure that a dumb question is just that. A lot of people have it. I also have it. Let's go. I'm not going alone. I'm going with one person like you all know. Tsymbaliuk, what are you doing here? Of course, we understood perfectly well what each of us was doing here, no joke. My colleague Roman Tsymbaliuk and I are going to the Donetsk region to see with our own eyes and show you the war as it is. But since people don't go to Donbas empty, we also drive cars for defenders, which you, our dear viewers, donated through Fund 24. These are two of the dozens of cars you purchased for the defense forces. So I bow to you and invite you to help close our new fundraiser as soon as possible. Well, in the meantime, we are approaching the war zone. I want to share my feelings with you. What does it feel like for a person who knowingly and voluntarily goes to a war zone? Fear and at the same time adrenaline, curiosity. When you've already sat down and left, it's actually easier. And when you are just preparing and there is an opportunity not to do it, then you have a lot of thoughts. This is not my first trip to the front, but it's the same every time.
I will get to the Donetsk region for the first time. I've never been there. Because we are not war correspondents. Well, at least I'm definitely not. I'm no longer a correspondent at all. I am sometimes told there, oh, you saw Putin eye to eye a lot, you were not afraid of anything. I say, people, there, if there is any discomfort, it is absolutely without risk to life and health. And here it is completely different. And I feel like it's so internal, not like jittery. Or maybe yes. Maybe jitters. Well, there is fear, and everything else. As they say, if it bangs somewhere nearby and doesn't kill, then you will stop being afraid, right? Well, let's see. Let's hope that God, who looks after the descendants of the grand Ukrainians, will continue this work in the future. As it was said, with Channel 24 to victory.
10 hours of travel, and we are in Kramatorsk. The occupiers' position is 20 kilometers from here. You can call it in different ways. The third line of defense, the fourth line of defense, the combat zone or the zone of destruction, for example, of the enemy's long-range MLRS. But the best life of this city, in my opinion, is described by two words: anxiety and calmness. First of all, the anxiety is due to the sounds of explosions from nearby positions. They can be heard throughout the day, but are especially audible at night, along with the sounds of heavy machinery driving through the streets. But, as I said, there is another key word in Kramatorsk, which has a completely opposite meaning. You feel calm here. You feel it when you see people in pixels who are literally everywhere. You are definitely familiar with this feeling from the first weeks of the full-scale invasion. So, if you feel anxious in some Ukrainian city when you see people in pixelated uniforms, most likely you are too far from the front. And not so much physically as mentally.
It is thundering from there. There are 15 kilometers at most. It seems that the front is already there. Here, in the absolutely fantastic Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk, I made the following conclusion. Our country is big, but in fact, everything is very, very close here. And we need to defend the motherland here, because we will have to defend it in Kiev or near Kiev, LVIV. You can choose your city.
So if it seems to you that there is no more war, you should know that you are approaching the defeat of Ukraine. In this case, I invite you to visit the Donetsk region. Bring something to the Ukrainian military as a volunteer. Talk to them, invite them for coffee, and you will feel that you will find out the real state of affairs. Do something useful and really bring Ukraine's victory closer. By the way, congratulations from our defenders.
We would like to thank you for the equipment provided, which is very necessary in our unit. The guys perform combat missions and perform on this all-wheel drive vehicle. Accordingly, you know that all this equipment is consumable. We have a lot of losses and fails. Therefore, it is constantly necessary to update our fleet. This is thanks to you, thank you very much. The guys from the front line also send you all congratulations and a big thank you.
Roman and I are separated. He goes on a tour of the frontline city and to meet with officers. And I'm going to Chasiv Yar. For Ukraine, this is one of the most important lines of defense. For Russians, this is one of the dream achievements. We are going to Chasiv Yar. You see, the road is so-so. I hope it won't shoot us. At the entrance to the city, on both sides of the road, we see overturned and mutilated cars. At the same time, people sometimes live in the houses around and do the usual things. But, of course, the closer to the front, the fewer people. Well, Chasiv Yar itself is a completely empty city. Here, the streets are not full of pixelated military uniforms, as in Kramatorsk. These streets are empty and full of anticipation. At any moment, an artillery shell, a mortar mine, or, perhaps most unpleasantly, an enemy FPV drone that sees its target in real time, can arrive. The positions of the Russians are only a few kilometers from here, so the sounds of explosions in Chasiv Yar almost do not subside. There is both the echo of the incoming shells and the sounds of the outgoing shells. But there is not much time to figure it out. We try to move quickly. Come on, Andy, run right away.
Let's get in.
It's scary. We stop at the command post of the advanced combat units of the border guards. This is a relatively secure place where we were allowed to record interviews with the defenders of Ukraine. We are introduced to a border guard named Andriy. This is the same Ukrainian man who made big civilian plans a few months ago.
Well, I just found a job, and then I was handed a summons on the street, and on July 1st last year, it turns out, I came to the border guards.
In which city or town did it happen?
It happened in Kiev. I was just going to sign a contract with a pretty cool studio that develops computer games. But they handed me a summons. Well, this happened, and I left.
How did you feel when it was handed over? Did you have any options as to where exactly to go if you got into the army and eventually to the front?
Well, in general, there was only one feeling that my moment had come. And then I just let go of everything, went with the flow. I looked at what I just liked more, what could be changed, what could not be changed. I began to study military affairs in general and the case against tankers in general. I was also sent to study in Britain, which was quite useful, because I had no idea about military affairs at all.
And here is how Andriy talks about his baptism of fire, the first battle with the enemy.
Well, we sat in a position. We were waiting, as always shells were coming 360 degrees around. Somewhere closer, somewhere farther they were blasting. Well, then they talk to us on the radio and say that, guys, get ready for the battle. I will say right away that it became scary, but the main point here is not to let yourself become numb because of fear, but to let it just go in a different direction. This is the main point that I realized while being here. And the guys and I just ran to the second floor of the building, set up the installation, and I saw the target. And, to be honest, then everything happened a little, as if in a fog, half automatism. Well, I passed to the radio that I was hovering, they told me, fire, that's all. I'm here because I understand that I have a family, I have a wife, I have a mom, I have a dad. I have an uncle, an aunt, I have brothers, although they do not fight, but they do other things that are very useful. I have a friend in Britain. He said from the very beginning of the war, I will come and help. I understand that when I have such people behind me, I am simply not ashamed to become a little part of the shield from Russians.
After talking to Andriy, my attention is drawn to another young guy who, in front of my eyes, has never moved from his place for a whole hour. He will only concentrate on talking into different walkie-talkies over and over again and quickly write something down. This is how the signalman Pavlo fights. He is responsible for connecting literally everyone with everyone. Pavlo has been on the front line for a year and also joined the troops after leaving the IT sector. How would you describe this year of your life now?
Strange.
Why?
A lot of new things. In general, what was the strangest thing? It's just that everything is strange to me. I never expected to be in the army, let alone on a contract.
And what did you want to do?
Things I've been doing before. Programming. I did. Programming.
But did this knowledge really come in handy for you?
Programming. Yes, of course.
Of course, they did.
They are needed here.
And what could you tell those guys who have a technical education, but either do not want to join the army, or are even afraid to join the army, or afraid to receive a summons there? They live there without leaving their apartment. Well, there are those.
What about them? They should contact with someone, with a battalion or brigade, in which the signalmen are needed. From what I know, they are needed in a lot of points. So that they just contact them directly and go to a certain brigade. If they're afraid to join the army, they should know, they'll be found in any way. They probably won't be able to sit for long.
Listen, will they be here all the time somewhere in the area of the war zone, or will they have rotations? In case of the State Border Guard Service.
They'll have rotations, of course, everyone has rotations. There is rotation in the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine, everywhere in the army.
And this man has been fighting since the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. Andriy joined the Border Guard Service as a volunteer and became a gunner of the American-made Mk-19 grenade launcher. This is a nightmare for the Russian occupiers, because during their meat assaults, the Mk-19 fires up to 440mm shells every minute. And imagine, Andriy and his fellow grenade launchers have already destroyed more than 100 Russian occupiers.
I also volunteered without having any previous combat experience, as I realized that the situation in Ukraine was critical, so I needed to mobilize.
Over time, it becomes easier and more difficult to fight at the same time, says the defender.
Yes, rotations are different. When we arrived in the first rotation, there was complete uncertainty, with having no previous combat experience, and the people who were with us, they did not have it either. There was no such interaction between other units. But with each rotation, everything improves. In principle, it is getting better on the one hand in terms of interaction, but on the other hand, worse is that the enemy's potential has also increased. The war has moved to a slightly harsher phase. And this takes into account FPV, and Mavic's reconnaissance drones, and the ones which drop ammunition. Yes, it is getting more difficult in this regard.
Andriy pays special attention to the combat little drones which drop ammunition. In the area where he is fighting, the Russians have recently begun to use an insane number of drones with ammunition drops. Small Vogue shells most often do not kill a soldier, but inflict wounds, that is, make him incapacitated for a certain time. But being combined with other, heavier weapons, this is enough for the front line to move slowly. It turns out that the Russians began to use Ukrainian tactics against the defense forces, which our defenders have mastered a long time ago. However, they use it on even a larger scale than Ukraine, at least on this part of the front line. This means that we urgently need a lot of electronic warfare equipment, that is, we need a lot of donations, as well as support for production from the state. At the same time, the other two elements are no less important for Ukraine's victory, says Andriy. This is real Western support with equipment and ammunition, as well as new people.
Sooner or later, you're going to have to come. I think it's better to come of your own free will than to be forcibly taken away.
Why?
I think it will be morally easier somehow, for myself and for my family, than to say, then I was taken away, I don't want to fight. And it's happening sometimes here. It is better to tune into this yourself, because the state of affairs in our country now is not very good in this regard, so everyone is needed.
And here is Leonid, a man with unique combat experience. During the 2 years of service, which he volunteered, Leonid tried all types of weapons from a machine gun and a machine gun to a handheld anti-tank grenade launcher and an ATGM, Stugner, which he now serves as a gunner. He has results both in the destroyed equipment and in the destroyed enemy manpower. With my participation, at least one armored personnel carrier exploded there, and there, well, 5 or 6 Russians. It definitely happened. These are the first ones there, before the rotation. Well, now, how many of them died in that tank, and how many ran out there? Well, 5 more Russians were seen just leaving the tank. And I don't know what happened to them next. Well, I think there are about a dozen of Russian occupants. With such results and such combat experience, Leonid shares his possible scenario of victory. Well, I think that if our one fighter overcomes 4 to 6 Russians, then, in principle, we will win simply by numbers. At the same time, Leonid does not say that fighting against the Russians is a cakewalk. Rather, it is a challenge that needs to be dealt with. It's not weak action, so to speak. You understand that you are the part of all events in general. And the fact that there is history itself, the very thing that is being created. Plus, you go out directly. Basically, you need to go directly visible with the tank, with armored vehicles. The tank sees you and will shoot you much faster. That's why we need to be creative, come up with something. That is, you need to be creative. And as you can get a shell, so can they as well. And it all keeps you going, it gives you drive, adrenaline, and it somehow works out. Finally, Leonid does a completely unexpected thing. Unexpected neither for me or, I suspect, for anyone else at the command and observation post. The fighter is holding in his hands a Ukrainian musical instrument drimba, aka Jew's harp. Live music begins to play on the command and observation post. During the first trip to Chasiv's Yar, our film crew was amazed by the beauty and richness of these landscapes, as well as the feeling of home, which for some reason comes here, in the east, as you approach the front line, even if you were born hundreds or thousands of kilometers from here. After returning from Chasiv's Yar, it became known that our colleague, Channel 24 presenter Artem Ovdienko, decided to change the word to a real weapon and joined the ranks of Ukrainian border guards. He used the recruiting system and took the oath. A low bow to him and all the defenders, as well as to the people who are bringing victory closer in another effective way. Take care of yourselves and of Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
Клас.